Great. All right, I'm going to kick us off. Welcome, you all. My name is Dana Childress. I am the VP of the Leading Places to Work function here at Leading Edge. It's so great to see a lot of familiar faces who have been joining us for our After Survey Action series all summer and now into October. I can't believe we are in October. It is still very warm where I am here in DC, but I am enjoying it because I know it won't last too long. It's my pleasure today to kick us off on our topic this month, which is on performance management. And I'm excited to be joined today by Margaret Garza, who is our lead people scientist with Culture Amp. Since you all took the survey, you're very familiar with Culture Amp. She has a lot of experience in helping people analyze and understand their data and then be ready to take action. And specifically today is going to talk to us about building a culture-first performance management system. This topic is going to be a bit more frontal. She's going to share a lot of content with you all. And so we invite you all to sit back and relax and take that in. There will definitely be time for questions at the end, but if you do have a question that you don't want to forget, please feel free to drop it in the chat, either for the full group or you can message it directly to Leah or myself if you want to ask it privately. We'll make sure to lift that up for Margaret when we get to that time. And just a reminder, we are recording and we will make sure to send out the slides, which we know are questions that folks are often curious about. Leah will send that out to you tomorrow. So with that, Margaret, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. It's nice to meet you all. Again, I'm Margaret Garza. I have my PhD in industrial organizational psychology. So what that means is it's my passion to speak science to business strategy. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk a little bit about how we can do things from a scientific perspective and really dig into performance in a way that we know is going to be in line with best practices. So let's jump into a bit of an agenda. We have our welcome and introductions, check. We're going to talk about what performance management is and why does it matter. We are going to talk about what culture first performance would be. And we're also going to then really spend the meat and potatoes of our time digging into how we can build a culture first performance process. So that is going to make our session on building a culture first performance system today. So let's jump in from the start of it. What is performance management and why does it matter? Oopsie. So performance management, we're used to thinking about has to do with goal setting, it has to do with feedback. But really the part that I want to highlight today is the importance of trust and communication in that process and going from these formal components that we talk about with the goal setting moment and the feedback moment, and really talking about how it's an ongoing process of coaching and discussion that is punctuated by formal moments. And so we'll kind of get into both pieces of that, starting with the main two components. So there's a measurement side of performance management, and there is a growth side of performance management. And measurement's really about getting aligned for goals and expectations and ensuring that we have standards in place and differentiating between our high and our low performers, whereas our developmental conversations are more employee driven and they're more about career progression and skill sets and abilities and trying to figure out where that person will want to go. And inherently, these two topics need to be integrated into one conversation. And sometimes that can work out beautifully, but inherently there is some friction in bringing them together. And I think that is the place where the discussions can become rich about how to do this well, because we need to balance the employee and the organization and figure out how to move that forward for two sets of goals, growth and performance, organizational performance too. So let's pause the information to you all and just take a second. I want to know from your perspective, how effective do you think performance management is at your company? We keep it simple, a three anchor selection today. And we're at 90% participation rate. Pretty good. So from your votes, I can end the poll here. It looks like most folks are saying it's about average. 58% are saying it's average, but we do have, oops, sorry, I pushed the button. I should have. There you go. We do have quite a few that are saying that the performance management is not effective, 38%, so a little over a third. And this is not uncommon. I'm about to share with you what other organizations say right now from the survey that the aggregate, the 300 plus organizations completed the last engagement survey. Our question on our performance review process helps me grow and improve. 48% rated that item favorably and 19% unfavorably. So there's a little bit of opportunity here to make this a strong system. But overall, we see that historically performance management systems get a lot of gruff from the field. Only 3% of employers believe that it delivers exceptional value, whereas 48% believe that they need more work. That's actually right in line with the favorability of that item that I just recited. And 90% heads of HR believe that systems don't yield accurate information. And then 95% of managers have some dissatisfaction with their system. So this is an ongoing conversation. I attend a conference annually, SIOP, and some folks are like, throw out performance systems. And I'm here to say, no, let's not throw out the baby, but we do have a lot of opportunity to make it better, because when a performance management system is working, the data shows that there are huge benefits to effective performance management systems. So we see benefits in not only performance, but in motivation. We see advantages to company performance in terms of innovation. And in fact, your organization's already rating higher on some of the things that we think of highly for innovation, like having safety to take risks on my team, 78% favorability for that item. And so if you mix in a strong performance management system and have these open conversations, that psychological safety only grows, and so does that innovation. So together, there's a lot of momentum and reasons that we would want to invest in this process and make sure that the time that we're spending is time well spent. There's a saying in there somewhere. And when we think about it, we need to think about who this matters to. There are multiple stakeholders in the game for this. And we need to think about the competing priorities and complementary priorities of these stakeholders. So we have the organization level, the company itself, where we need to think about performance of the business. We need to think about the standards that we're trying to reach and having some accountability to that, as well as external stakeholders. For managers, there's goals of having documentation for accountability. There's goals of succession planning. There's goals to develop our people. So you're really spanning across the lines of all of the goals. And then for the employees themselves, there's compensation. There's very real desires to have honest conversations about if my compensation's aligned or if it needs to be progressing. And then also development. Now, just focusing on the employee box alone, that is a competing priority even within one individual stakeholder. So to be able to say, I would love to have a compensation increase, but I also need to have real conversations about where I should be improving my performance. But how am I going to want to talk about improving my performance when I might get dinged on my compensation? It makes it very difficult to balance these at the same time. So this is something we need to think about when we pace out where different pieces of the conversation should go in our performance management system. So why should I bother? I feel like we've hit this one pretty well. Performance management is about, of course, encouraging performance, but aligning expectations as well. When we do it well, we have confidence in our business performance. We're on the same page as a group. The big thing that we're really going to go into in this session today is a fairness and transparency. At the heart of an effective performance management system is a sense of fairness and understanding of how we got to our outcomes, and a sense of ability to make changes. So there's we'll talk about growth mindset as we go forward as well. So this is the textbook, What is Performance Management and Why Does It Matter? But let's do a culture amp take on it and talk about what is culture first performance. And so truthfully, like, what does it mean to be culture first? I'm not sure if that's jargon you all throw around in your terminology. I'm in the business of culture, so we speak about it quite frequently. This is a quote that I really appreciate from our CEO. I don't hawk his lines too often, but I really enjoy this one. So a brand is a promise that we make to our customers. So when you sign up or you come to something with our name on it, you kind of know what you're going to get. But a culture is how you deliver on that promise. And so what he's saying here is that our culture is our people are who are going to be the ones to give that brand. And if we invest first on our people, then the rest will take care of itself. So the business outcomes we want will take care of itself if we're focused on the culture of the company and the culture of the people. And so to apply that to where we're going to go with performance today, it means strong alignment. It means understanding that for the business to succeed, the culture isn't the trade-off. It's actually a piece of that foundation. It also means that we have to have some consistency and understanding that if there's going to be a trade-off between a practice and a value, that the company's values should be the one that wins and progresses. And that this has to progress, or has to permeate through all lines of the business. So it's not just leaders are culture first, employees are culture first. It permeates through all layers of the organization. And then finally, this is that culture 101 that we celebrate through continued rituals and things that kind of help identify and make us us. So if we see that through all practices of our organization, we need to see that in our performance management system as well. It needs to be people first and considerate of the employee. So let's just pause here after hearing a little bit about what we think of when we think culture first. I'd love to know if you consider your company's performance process to be culture first. We're at 75%. I like to get over 80%. I'm a numbers person by nature. 85%, I'll take it. 85%, 89%, I'll take it. So about a quarter of you all said yes. Do you feel like your process is culture first? About a third said no, and about less than half, 44%, said not sure. So what we can do today is hopefully after we go through what culture first performance looks like, we can think of ways to turn those no's into yes and make them more culture first. And for those of you who aren't sure, then you're in the right place, because that is where we're going today. So what are we solving for when we think of culture first performance? First, traditional, there's three major opportunities. So this is the topic of like the conferences I go to all the time. So traditional approaches are laden with bias and unfair processes. So folks using personal judgment and not having processes that are robust towards those errors. This has huge implications for high stakes decisions like hiring and promotions. And I have a ton of literature I could share about gender differences and how that plays out when we are left to our own biases. The second major problem that shows up in traditional performance appraisals has to do with over-indexing on the evaluation component. So thinking first of what we want to do from an organizational side, which is like maybe rate our employees or rank them high to low and know where we're going to put people, and forgetting that these people also have their own goals and where they want to develop and grow, and balancing the need to do both of these things simultaneously. And then finally, the other huge component is the cumbersome nature of a performance process. And it's even worse if it doesn't have a foundation in science. And so we're asking folks to do a lot of lifting and working and thinking, and then we're skeptical of the results. We're not even bought into the process that we just did. So to solve for this, we want our performance management that's going to be science-backed, purpose-driven, and built for today's world of work and flexible to you all. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all, and there is a lot of room for crafting and making this right for you. But there's some fundamental things we can keep in mind while making something that's going to work for your people. So this will be the main piece of where we're going today, is how do we build that? And the theory that we're going to anchor on is a psychological theory called organizational justice. So Greenberg is a famous psychologist, and I really love a good psychological theory that's robust and parsimonious. And so what does that mean? Robust in that you will see this phenomenon make sense everywhere. Like you can get into a dispute with your 5-year-old and you'll say, oh, her perceptions of justice were completely off. It was not the outcome she was upset about, but I didn't even let her tell me that she was upset. We didn't have a process. So it really works all over, but especially in the workplace, we have very strong beliefs that are core to us about fairness. And the way we think about fairness really boils into 3 buckets. And this is the parsimonious part. It's simple enough you can remember, and it applies to a lot of areas of human experience. So when we think of fairness and when we feel tension or frustration with an interaction, it will often boil down to, it might start off with the outcome. You might say, I don't like this. I didn't get what I wanted. But if we back up, we could say that it's not just that I didn't get what I wanted. It's not what you said, it's how you said it. The process that you went through with me to get to the outcome didn't feel fair. You didn't give me an opportunity to share my thoughts on something. You didn't even ask me if I agreed with you as you were sharing information with me. And that also lends itself to the interaction itself. Is the interaction considerate? Is it humane? Is it caring and compassionate? And so as we go through performance management and what does it mean to be people first or culture first in our performance management, what I would ask for you all to think about is your system fair in its process and transparent and understandable? Is your system built to make managers have effective interactions with their employees? So are folks trained to have really rich interactions? And are those outcomes, once we get there, understandable, so that everything you did and all the work you put into led to at least an outcome that somebody could receive, even if they didn't agree with it? I just did a lot of talking, and here's actually the model. So, so for the process piece, the rules for decision making is what we're talking about. The consistency and how they're delivered. So I don't wonder if Frank had the same type of conversation as I did. I trust the system because the process is robust. Is there a place for employee input? Is there biases that are minimized? And I feel confident that those biases were minimized. And we'll talk about how to do that. And then for those interactions, are managers trained on how to have these conversations, and also our employees trained on how to receive feedback? There's a really good book called Thank You for the Feedback. I recommend it to like literally everybody. It's just a great place to start for everyone going into these types of conversations. So we want that treatment and the information they receive to be considerate. And then finally, the outcomes. So were the expectations met or were they surprised? Was there equity and was everything appropriate? People can be disappointed with the outcome, but satisfied with the process. And that might be the best that we can do sometimes, and that's okay. So these are some of the foundational building blocks that we're going to infuse through the three elements: process, interaction, and outcome. So we want our process to be fair, transparent, equitable. We want to create alignment between employees' goals, the organization's goals, and truly understand where gaps exist as opportunities. We want conversations and those interactions to be growth focused and respectful. And we want a commitment from everybody in that organization. So employees and managers and HR all showing that this is working is going to help with the change management as well. So let's kick things off into the first piece of our fairness bubbles, and that's the process. A fair and equitable process means having clarity, and that builds trust when things are clear. We know that fairness is important. Employees are fine with different outcomes. Even lower performance ratings are received when they're fair. The research shows that. Other research has shown that perceptions of fairness had a strongly significant relationship with both employee and organizational performance. So it wasn't just high and low ratings, but the perception of how that information came about. So there are going to be other trainings you can take, and of course, about reducing your bias and how do I change how I look at the world, or how do managers change about are they biased? This type of discussion is approaching the problem from a different lens. So from my standpoint in this conversation, it's less about changing the hearts and minds of a manager and their own personal biases, and instead acknowledging that humans have bias, and we're going to make systems that are robust to that bias. So bring me your most biased human, and I'm going to create a tool that they cannot break, because there are checks and balances in place to ensuring that no matter who comes to this system, we will kind of filter it through, clean out those biases, and make sure the person who's being evaluated gets a fair shake. So acknowledging human susceptibility to bias and accounting for error to improve a measurement. Not to say you shouldn't also work on human bias, but if we can do both at the same time, then we can really start feeling confident that that we're making progress in our measurement in that part of performance management. So when I say bias, I've been using the word left and right, bias, and we won't go too much into it today. Which of these are you unfamiliar with? We're about 85%, 88%, pretty good. 92%, nice. So it sounds like the most common bias that we're not familiar with is idiosyncratic rater bias. This is a great opportunity to plug the fact that we're going to have a whole session that we're going to offer on these. Central tendency bias is another high one, and recency bias. Gender bias, most people know about. We hit that one usually pretty strong, even though we still have a lot of work to do in that domain. Definitely, there are many more that we could mention and go into, and I could spend time talking about them, but I wanna kind of make sure that we have space for that. October 30th, we're gonna have a session just on this topic. So if you're interested in any of these bubbles, make sure to come and learn about the different biases. I will say, since so many of you did not hear of idiosyncratic rater bias, this is when people evaluate skills they're not good at and rate others higher. So if I'm not good at that, then maybe I think everyone's much better than me. You might also rate other people lower when you're great at something. Dana, you know that one. Yeah. So sometimes we have imposter syndrome. I actually don't know the research behind this, but I wonder if there's gender differences too. So if we have, or age differences, if we have imposter syndrome, I could see us having higher idiosyncratic rater effect too. Lots of fun on a different conversation. So come by on the 30th for that one. Okay. So how to maintain fairness and performance. What you see here is just pretty much the main components of a performance management system. So we have communication, goal setting, feedback, goal tracking. So this ongoing goal setting and feedback piece that happens, then formal performance evaluations, and then calibrations. This is having something in place like this that is clear in each of these outlined for how you want to execute them is going to be your first step to making sure things are perceived as fair and making sure that each of these is thought out. So for your communication, you want a transparent process. You want it to be two directions so the employee has opportunity to speak and have input. For your goal setting, this has to be participative. It has to be employee driven for the goal setting, and then the manager can help and have conversations for making sure that those goals are appropriate for the business and make sense. And then for feedback and goal tracking, having that continuous and multi-source feedback is great for development here. And then for reviews, having objective criteria, using examples, being behavioral, and then a calibration process. If you're going to do evaluations for raises and promotions, a calibration process in place is a really, really strong way to ensure that we're reducing bias, and also for employees to understand that we're taking it seriously. We're making sure that all raters are aligned on what the criterion is. So why do we create alignment? So alignment's one piece of this puzzle, alignment between employee goals and employee performance and business goals and business performance. This is the what's in it for me for employees. So if we just focus on the organization's criteria for success, we're really going to miss out on the mark for a deeper discussion on development. And that's part of the bigger issue we discussed earlier, where traditional systems will over-index on evaluation and not really have this conversation in a two-direction way with the employee, and make space for that person to weigh in on what they want for themselves and where they see themselves, and how might this meet the goals of the organization. So we want this to foster growth and motivation and commitment to the business. This is all a softer side to performance that I think a lot of folks can miss the mark on. So how do we do this? In order to be culture first, we need to create opportunities for managers to talk openly and align around performance and goals. So goal setting together and aligning developmental goals with organizational goals and career progression should be baked into your performance management system, and not just right after your performance evaluations. Like, this should be something that we are making recommendations for certain times of the year to set our goals together, and certain cadences for having these conversations on goal progression, so that by the time we get to our formal performance evaluation, this has already been ongoing and there shouldn't be any surprises. This also means aligning as we go too, to see if there are shifts in our skill sets, and if we need to be more aspirational. So some indicators that we can look for are, motivation is dropping and boredom is happening. Then maybe our goal setting was too low, or maybe we do need to have a shift in our conversations, but it shouldn't be at that performance evaluation moment. So what does this actually look like in a tangible way? This is one example. I want to be really clear that there's no one way to do this. And at Culture Amp, we work with folks all the time where people come to us with how it works for you, and we think through this with you and try to instill some of these principles into a process or a skeleton that fits your structure. In this example, what you'll notice, the fundamental components that are worth calling out, is that there's these 4 in the middle. There's a big picture, but these 4 violet circles, and then there's these 4 teal circles. They're both about the same process. The top 4 are just about performance, formally for organization metrics, organization performance, the things that you need to do to meet your role. And the bottom 4 are about your goals and your performance for your own development and where you want to go. And so we have a series of conversations, manager one-on-ones, we create our individual development plans, and we bring these goals together and we track them regularly, potentially in those one-on-ones. And we have feedback going on, and then we have goal completion, and then eventually a performance appraisal, a formal performance evaluation, where all of the meat and potatoes of this work that's been done through the year, these goals you're working on for yourself, the alignment you've created to see how they feed into your performance and how your career steps might look. That happens with all this happening in the background, the other 300 and whatever days left of the year. So this is one way. In this example, we would have potentially a performance cycle and a development cycle. So once a year performance, and then once a year, and then the half a year mark, a developmental conversation, and then ongoing conversations through one-on-ones. So a system like this, however you want, however you map it out, having that clarity though creates the perceptions of fairness too, so that people know what to expect. So moving from process and into the interaction, the human element of this conversation. Some of this stuff should be second nature, but I don't know if you saw Talladega Nights, but like you might be human in all aspects, but then all of a sudden you get into these feedback conversations, like, what do I do with my hands? And everyone just gets real clammy and uncomfortable and just awkward. And so we have to remember how to human, like how do you human in a performance conversation and talking about awkward things like feedback. So leading with respect is very obvious, but even sometimes remembering that you think you're being respectful, but you might sound kind of cold because you're so nervous. And so even as the manager in this conversation, having to check your own feelings and your own insecurities going into that conversation is really important. So acknowledging challenges of the person that you're talking to and yourself, and leaving your own baggage aside, fostering that two-way dialogue. When all else fails, creating the space to stop talking and let the other person share their feelings. And then, of course, if we can get past all of this, the constructive feedback is where the growth happens, but we get stuck before people can receive the feedback. This is the part where manager training is going to be really helpful. So going into a performance cycle, even having a quick round of refreshers for managers to think about, because it's not stuff that we haven't heard, but we do need to keep it top of mind going into these sessions. This is my little, I have to bring this back into the conversation. Margaret's dissertation excitement. This is our brain on feedback. So the science behind this is we have emotional responses, right? We try to like pretend emotions don't exist. A lot of folks are like not bringing emotions to work, but when we ignore the fact that they exist, then it just becomes more problematic. So if we are receiving feedback and having an emotional response to it, we're not able to learn. It blocks our learning. So if that feedback comes in the wrong way, or we receive it the wrong way, it has the power to completely derail us to this bucket of emotional regulation. Alternatively, feedback, the way it's delivered and the way it's received, has the power to change all of our resources into motivation or learning. So those are the 3 different directions feedback can focus your attention. And what we can do as feedback deliverers is we can be considerate deliverers and facilitate our messaging in a way that is educational rather than emotional or personal. And there are so many methods like the situation behavior impact, the SBI model. We have other master classes. We could talk about feedback delivery if that's of interest, where we deep dive into how to get into this. So this really goes nicely into having a growth mindset as you are entering into that performance conversation. I'd love to open the chat a bit for a moment. You can go in the chat if it's most comfortable, but what does having a growth mindset mean to you just on its face? And if you don't know, that's also okay. You can say, I don't know yet. Being open to growing and learning. Yes. The belief that individuals can grow and learn over time. That is right. I mean, that's the textbook correct. That is exactly right. Any other thoughts on what does it mean to have a growth mindset? And it's okay if we're not quite sure, if we're ready and eager to hear, not feeling like I'm just bad at something. Oh, that is such a good observation to share, because that's like fundamental attribution error. So when you're good at something, it's because you worked really hard. But if you're bad at something, I'm just bad at something. That whole error. So yeah, nobody's just bad at anything. We can all improve. Actively seeking growth opportunities. So many good ideas coming in now. Being able to evolve, thinking outside the box. Yes. Look, now we're percolating. Sharing knowledge. Yes, there's a sense of collaboration and being able to grow through different opinions and different pieces of understanding. Thank you. This is exactly where we want to go with this conversation. So growth mindset. Dr. Carol Dweck, she was an educational researcher. She first studied children, and she found that the way teachers even talk to children can change the trajectory of how they grow in a classroom. Like, that's how profound this can make a difference. Like, you think of poor little children and what we can do for them. So fixed mindset is the belief that people's abilities are predetermined at birth. Like, a lot of really deep implications there. And we don't always know we come into the world with a fixed mindset, right? No, I don't think anyone would declare that they think people are just coming into the world unable to do something. But sometimes those beliefs are so deeply ingrained in us that we don't really recognize that we were having those beliefs, but they come out when we're talking, or they come out when we're afraid to approach something new, or they come out when we say, oh, you just do that task, you're better at it anyway. That's elements of that fixed mindset. Now, the growth mindset is a belief that skills can be cultivated through effort and through challenges. And all of this is like one of those core beliefs and foundations that can have huge implications, but it doesn't have to be this way. So you might start off with these really deep beliefs that you don't even know that you have, or you didn't realize that some like loose language came out and you're like, oh, I guess that was a little fixed. We can actively impact how we see the world, and we can work towards having a growth mindset. And I think that's the most beautiful piece of this theory, is that it doesn't mean like you are stuck. I came in a fixed person and now I am destined to be this way. We can adopt a growth mindset. And that means that we believe that a gap is a challenge, and a challenge feedback in that challenge is a path or a tool that we can use. And so if we adopt this mindset, we are believing that we're using feedback as a tool for others and for ourselves. And it helps us to immediately put that emotional response to feedback away, because it's a gift. It's useful for us to get what we want. If we adopt this mindset, it means that we create intrigue by mistakes. So when mistakes happen, we're not feeling that gut clenching, oh gosh, feeling. We think, oh, why did that happen? And we can lean into it. It means that we can enjoy a challenge, and it means we can grow our confidence from growth and not be just a slave to praise. Because fixed mindset relies on praise, and it means we can only receive praise to continue forward. Whereas a growth mindset means we actually change our fuel system to being that feedback because we want to get even better and better. So companies who are committed to unlocking this and unpacking this really do see like a flourish in motivation and stretch goals and challenges and performance ultimately. So what does it actually look like in things from day to day, from maybe an HR perspective? It means continuous learning. It means having productive feedback loops in place as part of our interactions. It means having time to set aside for self-reflection and appreciation for the progress that we've made. I can do something now better than I used to be able to do it. And then also taking action to plan future growth and skill development. Okay, final piece to today's puzzle, outcomes. So this one's like more straightforward. If the takeaway truly is if you do the process and you do the interaction, the outcomes are going to be like fixing themselves. It's all like you're cleaning your room as you go, and then you get to the last thing and all the puzzle pieces go in the right shelves because there's not many other places for them to go. So if you have done your work here and you have all of the process work and the interaction work in place, you're going to see a reduction in the cost to the users of your system. You're going to have continuous feedback in place and not just have it once a year. And so that everyone's muscle for receiving feedback and everyone's muscle for giving feedback will be nice and strong. And so that one time a year conversation is a lot easier and also not a surprise. You're also going to see that your process has a lot of flexibility if we're doing this well. The outcome will be a more flexible system that will be able to adjust based on circumstances. This should also be something that can be accomplished in the flow of your work so that you can still manage your other routine work and do your performance management. And that is through a reduction of time and effort and having your performance metrics well defined and core pieces of data necessary to make sure things are fair. And then also there's going to be a good amount of accountability and ownership. So it's not just manager driven, it will also be employee driven, especially those developmental parts. So the employee should have a voice in this. And that's part of the interactional justice too. So feeling like they can write their own goals and feeling like they can talk about where they feel like they are in this process. So this is the nuts and bolts to what a process might look like. And here is how it looks like when we have done it well. We have that personalized and continuous conversation in our one-on-ones. We have the ability to share our own goals and then get feedback on them and then really tweak them to be good for myself, the organization, and my career here. So that strong alignment. We have those meaningful feedback check-ins and performance processes that feel fair. So reviews that have calibrations, we have decisions that we understand. And then finally, we have some data that we can actually use from an HR perspective to really track where people are going and who we need and where talent should go. So this system, if it's built on some of these fundamental principles, is going to really feed the holistic process of performance. And truthfully, it's going to drive the employee experience in a positive direction as well. So the final point that I wanted to make before opening it up to you all to share your questions is that one of the top drivers that we see in our data across all organizations for engagement is learning and development and wanting to make your development with an organization. And so we talked earlier in this conversation about how we over-index on the metric, which I don't want to overcorrect. The measurement is important, but if we don't also foster the development simultaneously, we're missing out on an opportunity to really leverage our employee engagement and improve multiple things at one time. So that's the bulk of it. I feel like I left a good amount of time for questions too. I can stop screen sharing, maybe see some faces and some name boxes, and open the floor to some questions. And take a sip of coffee.
Margaret, while we wait for some other folks to percolate in the chat, one question that I had that I've received often is just about the recommended frequency and cadence for performance reviews. I know there's a lot of conversation now about whether you should do them quarterly, do them twice a year, do them annually. We have been experimenting with doing them quarterly so they can be more focused on outcomes, just because that's what's in my head since you just ended with that. And I'm just curious if you all have a recommendation to achieve some of these outcomes, if there's a particular cadence that feels better than others.
Yes, that's a great question. So I do want to lean into not being overly, on my end, overly prescriptive, because if we're not flexible to what you all can manage, then we wind up having a system that's overly burdensome, and then folks aren't bought in, or they're not doing it well or in good faith, because we can't keep up with that and our regular work. So if it's small, if the bits and chunks are small and achievable, quarterly can make sense. What a cadence I really like and have seen work really well is biannual. So development at the half year, and then performance at the 1 year. And then in those quarterly moments, you can still be working with your manager, but not have something that's as prescriptive from the organization down. I've also seen, we do quarterly here at Culture Amp, and have seen that work. It's just sometimes you get stuck into trying to make sure that you're getting the goal before the next quarter too. So there's trade-offs. And I think that the matter of what you're doing and how quickly you can affect change has to be in that conversation too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really helpful.
I see some questions coming in. How do you make managers accountable to their duty of feedback? So our managers don't end up providing feedback to their staff. Okay. So with that manager accountability, there's a variety of ways. This is complicated because it's about how much you can create that organizational change, and what kind of tools you have at your disposal. So for example, in our platform, the way we do it, there is a reporting mechanism, so that, like, cascading up and down, you can see how many managers conducted. You have to acknowledge that you did this conversation. And so it's not about what the ratings are, but there is a form of accountability for managers to have conducted the conversation, and we can track that in our metrics. So I don't, I tend to think that usually helps when there's something that is happening, and it's not about quality, it's just about compliance at that point. And so there's the compliance element, and then there's the change management and getting the buy-in. And so sometimes that buy-in and the change management have to do with employee engagement scores, and saying, like, look, we're not having the motivation here, and we're having folks say that they're not getting the L&D here, and finding other ways of creating unsticking points for those managers can be beneficial sometimes. Do you see this working any differently in schools with teachers, or for new staff versus established staff? Oh, wow. So I don't see this. So this is not here nor there. I have my master's in elementary education, so did a lot of work in schools before coming here. And when I got my PhD, it was wanting to work with teachers. This is because of motivational issues and burnout and things like that. Yes, this can work with teachers. The nice thing is teachers already have some systems that are in place, with observations that you can tie in. So those conversations are already naturally happening in your regular system. And it's just about tying what is already done in that paradigm into how you want it to look from an HR perspective. So I think the answer is yes to that. And then new staff versus more established staff. I think we all want development, and the content of those conversations will have to adjust based on skill set. And so that would be the main difference there. Oh, great question coming in on what calibrations mean. So calibrations are one mechanism that we have at our disposal to ensure that managers as raters are giving a fair shake and all rating the same way. And so if we're having a bunch of managers doing performance evaluations, you'll talk all about biases at the end of the month. We can do some frame of reference training to get all managers sort of calibrated at the beginning, but then afterwards, we can have managers come together, and it's usually a conversation that's moderated or hosted by HR. And managers will bring their ratings to the table and talk about, hey, I gave this person a 4 here. And then we talk about why that is. And they say, well, I gave this person a 5. And then we can really start to discuss examples of behaviors and match those to the numbers. And what you wind up getting in that discussion is a growing skill set for the managers to align with each other on the number. And it requires managers to have some behavioral examples and some really good evidence to support the numbers they chose. And then it also really makes for a fair shake on the people that they're evaluating as well. Oh, I would love that too, Dana. That would be fun. That's definitely like my passion is the intersection of these two areas. So any other thought? And if anybody has questions that I haven't answered well, you can also double down on me and say, no, Margaret, go back. You didn't hit my answer well enough. You provide templates of questions or conversation topic triggers for performance review. We're looking to simplify and have fewer questions, topics with our reviewers with a more focus on what they've achieved. Yes. So we have a whole performance side of our of the work that we do. And I'll have to get with our account manager. We have like whole design conversations on how to design a performance template with some best practices based in. I can tell you right now, like even the way we order our questions is intentional. So having someone start with, and we do self ratings, and we recommend self ratings as well as manager ratings so that you can come and kind of align. But starting with something that you've succeeded with and done well or made impact with, and then moving into some areas where you had some barriers, and then did you hit your goals? And so all of that's kind of helping the flow of the performance conversation to get somebody able to talk about their experiences and their behaviors in that performance period. So we do have some templates. I just have to get with account management about how to, if we can, or how to share those out, because they are part of that process. Thanks,
Vanina. I feel like we're coming to a good natural end, Margaret. So just want to extend gratitude for joining us and sharing all your wisdom on performance management. To everyone who's joined us, thank you for carving out time to learn a bit more about performance management. Like we said, there are going to be some other sessions on this topic, so keep an eye on your inbox and check out tomorrow. You'll get an email from Leah, which will include this recording and notes and an opportunity to share any reflections or feedback that you have for us as we continue to provide support to you all on this topic. So thank you all for being here. And again, thanks to you, Margaret and Culture Amp.
Thank you. It was lovely to see you all.